Again, we're in section 5.5 and we're on the third day of solving trig equations. So for our first example, our problem is 4 sine squared of x minus 1 is equal to 0. And again, we have this restriction that our solutions have to be between 0 and 2 pi, but not including 2 pi. So to solve this problem, notice I'm not going to factor here because I don't have a trinomial. Instead, what I'm going to do is start by adding that 1 over. So I'm at 4 sine squared of x is equal to 1. And then I divide both sides by 4. So now I have sine squared of x equals 1 over 4. And now to get sine by itself, I would take the square root of both sides. And this is going back to algebra 2. When I take the square root, I always include a plus or minus because a negative squared is positive and a positive squared is a positive. And when I take the square root of 1 over 4, I get the answer of plus or minus 1/2. So it might be easier for you to think and kind of separate this into saying sine has to equal a positive half and sine has to equal a negative half. So again, I'm trying to figure out when the y part of the coordinate is a half. So I know that means root 3 over 2 is in the x part, which means my denominator is going to be a 6. As far as the signs go, because I have a positive sign and a negative sign, I'm really kind of dealing with all 4 quadrants. So sine's positive in quadrant 1 and 2, and it's negative in 3 and 4. So I should have 4 answers, and they should all come within those first 4 quadrants. So my answers for x is pi over 6, so that gives me a positive 1/2. 5 pi over 6 gives me a negative 1/2. No, I lied. 5 pi over 6 will give you a positive half. 7 pi over 6 would give you a negative 1/2. And 11 pi over 6 would give you a negative 1/2. So these are our 4 answers. The reason I don't need to put that whole plus 2n pi on here is that as soon as I add 2 pi to any 4 of these angles, I'll be over this 2 pi restriction value. So clearly every answer bigger than this will, when I go 1 revolution around, will be over the 2 pi cutoff. So that's why we can kind of phase that step out. So kind of think of it as long as your x is by itself, you don't have to do any of that adding. Our next example is tangent of x sine squared of x is equal to 3 tangent of x. Again, with the restriction of 0 to 2 pi. So the first thing we need to do here is get all of our terms on one side. So I'm going to subtract that 3 tangent over. So when I subtract that over, my problem will say tangent of x sine squared x minus 3 tangent x equal to 0. And now when I look at this, I can factor out a tangent because they both have that in common. And when I take a tangent out, I'm left with sine squared of x minus 3. And now I have to set both terms, my binomial equal to 0. So from that, I'll get that tangent equals 0. And from this statement right here, when I set that equal to 0, I'll have sine squared of x minus 3 equals 0. So for this right-hand problem, I'm going to have to do a little work. First thing that I have to do is add the 3. So now I'm at sine squared of x equals 3. And then I take the square root. So sine of x equals plus or minus the square root of 3. So now I got to figure out what angles match this. So going back to the tangent one, remember that tangent is y over x. So the only way I would get an answer of 0 is if y is 0, if the 0 is on the top of the fraction. So that means this could be a 1 here. It could also be a negative 1. So the angle that matches this coordinate is 0 and pi. So there's 2 definite answers. Now I need to go over to this one here. So for sine, for this root 3, we know in a coordinate that the only way I get an answer of a root 3 is if the root 3 over 2 is in the y spot and I get a 1/2 in the x spot. Well, the issue is I'm not asking for y divided by x. I just want the answer of a root 3. And if you think about all your coordinates, there never has a root 3, positive or negative, ever appear in the y value. So this part of the problem is actually a new solution. An x value for this can't be determined because there never will be a coordinate with root 3 being in the y part. So the only answers to the problem are 0 and pi. So that's all for today. We'll pick up with this tomorrow.